もしやコスモでは。
Cosmo needs me free.
Cosmo AP Luxury Sports.
Welcome to part 55 of my 76 Mazda Cosmo restoration. As I mentioned last time, this episode I'm going to be doing the thing I've wanted to do since I started, installing the air suspension. And I'm going to start in the rear because I think that might be the easiest. Which of course sounds like the title of my sex tape. The solid axle in the rear has a fairly standard coil spring with a separate shock tucked behind it. Now I've already measured the coil spring at full droop here. It's about 9¼ inches, and at ride height it's about 7 inches. A setup like this is fairly easy because the coil spring can be directly replaced with an airbag. The key being that the airbag just has to have the correct load rating and dimensions to fit in the spot. Before I go any further with this, I just want to be very clear that I'm not trying to build a lowrider. I don't want to necessarily lay frame. I just want a car that can be nice and low when it needs to, looking great, but still have a comfortable ride height for daily driving. Plus, if I load like 500 pounds of concrete in the trunk, I want to be able to level the ride. Oh, those are actually kind of loose. Just taking the rear sway bar mounts off. And then I'll just unbolt the lower shock bolt. Take two. Well, it turns out the bottom shock bolt is seized into the bushing, and I thought about just grinding it out, but then I realized I might need the bottom of the shock still attached to the axle to hang the axle, so instead I decided to just unbolt the top of the shock. Still in good shape. I disconnected the passenger side shock too, and the axle wants to drop, but I think it's just the old bushings holding it in place, so I'm going to disconnect this Watts link and see if it will drop. Oh, that was looser than I thought. Is that what she said? Yay, that one's not seized. Yep, I needed a ratchet extension through the spring to unscrew this. Why do I feel like this bolt may have been installed backwards? There we go. Oh, whole axle just moved. That's a good sign. Yep, that did it right there. Maybe someone could tell me why there's a Watts link on a 4-link suspension. The stiff old bushings are still holding this thing in, but oh, holy shit, there we go. That's what I wanted. How the hell do I get it out? Here, it's off the little perch there, so it should just pop out with some persuasion. To come out. Oh, there you go. Push it forward. Aha! Sproing! there we go. Happened off camera, of course. Oh no, that was on camera. Okay. Woohoo! I'll be using these Firestone 815-148 tapered sleeve style air springs for the rear. They have a compressed height of 4¼ inches, a load rating of about 1,200 pounds, a ride height of about 7 inches, and a maximum height of about 9½ inches. Cool. Fits. Done. Decided that I better pull the brake caliper and the disc for better clearance. Someone put anti-seize on these, and it still works. Pops out. Lots of anti-seize. Good on whoever did that. Ooh, that's a bit crunchy. But of course, it doesn't have to go back in. Now the chance of these coming out is about 0. And primarily because they're not actually Phillips screws. Holy shit. Well, after I'm finished at the shop today, I'm buying a fucking lottery ticket because that never happens. Well, that also came off real easy. Cool. Cool. Of course I'm gonna blast this. I just want to take off the big chunks of crap so they don't clog up the blaster. And now, clean this thing up in the blaster. The window on my blast cabinet is, well, blasted. So until I replace it, I'm kind of blasting things by feel. I can't see a thing of what's going on in there. That's better. And now, just to keep it from flash rusting, I'll apply a little bit of POR 15's Metal Ready. I just have to keep it wet for 10 to 20 minutes and then rinse it off. Keep it wet for 10 to 20, then rinse it off. Title of my sex tape. Perfect. Nice and clean, and that should stay rust-free while I work on it. The stock spring mounts have to go. They're held in by 4 spot welds. I'm not sure if you can see these on camera, but I can see them here after rubbing a dirty finger on them. So I'll just drill them out. And hopefully a few hits with the air hammer should take that off. Jeez, yep. Wonder what this little hole is for. This needs to be flat. With the stock spring mounts gone, now I just need to build a flange to mount the air springs. Now keeping in mind that as this bag compresses, the bladder is going to push out against the mount. So it does need to be wide enough to support the bag. Turns out that the diameter of these looks about perfect, which is, call it 5 1/8. So I will make a set of circular flanges 5 1/4. Drew a 5 1/4 inch circle out in CAD and printed it with the crosshairs. A little bit of arts and crafts to cut this out so I can use it as a template. Kind of wish I had a 5 1/4 inch hole saw. Two plates cut to roughly 5 1/2 inches by 5 1/2 inches, and I'll just tack them together temporarily. Carefully center punch the hole, and then trace it out. Ugh, 3/8 figures. Yep, I don't have any of those weird non-metric sizes. 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch. A trick if you have to move the bed down is to use your previous size bit to keep it lined up. And 7/16, which is just a bit bigger than 3/8. Or so I'm told. And now to cut this out. Did I mention I wish I had a 5 1/4 inch hole saw? Need to keep them together with tack welds as I cut. That took over an hour. Now just break the tacks. There we go. And that's 2 air spring bottom flanges. Of course, since I'm in the flange making mood, I might as well make the flanges for the top of the air spring. But since these steps are exactly the same as the bottom flanges, I'll save you the joy of watching me repeat the same work, and we'll pick it up once those are done. The only changes between the flanges top and bottom are exactly like they are in humans. That is a different number of holes. Wow. I have to drill a big hole to make room for the air fitting, so I chose 1 5/8 because that's the size of hole saw I had. Well, that was a lot of work, but I have a complete set of flanges now. Looking back, I probably should have just drawn these things out in CAD and had them water jet cut. The idea is, however, this goes here. I want this to be capable of going as low as possible, which is going to create some extra work. What I'm going to do is cut a big chunk out of this control arm so that the flange can mount on the bottom of the arm. This hole represents the center of the spring, so I'm just going to roughly center it using the punch down tool as a guide because it's tapered, perfectly fits the drill hole. It doesn't have to be perfect. Ultimately I'll be able to line it up before I weld it. And I'll just eyeball this in place for now. I can't quite weld this in yet because, of course, I cut a whopping big chunk out of this control arm and thus basically removed all of the strength. So I have to box this section in, and I'm going to use this 3/16 inch flat bar. Of course, this is straight. That is a circle. In my random bits of metal bin, I found this somewhat half-inch aluminum bug, so I'll just drill it to match the holes on the spring flanges. Then I think I can create a jig by bolting the 2 flanges together. Make sure it's kind of reasonably straight here. It's going to have to be stupid tight. Now with it firmly clamped in the vise, I think that if I make some tack welds, I should be able to fold this thing along the outer diameter using the flanges themselves as a bending jig. I give my chances of success about 50-50. Only one way to find out. Holy crap, that's working. Just need more vise. I lifted the bench, tightening this vise. I've had to readjust this several times, but I mean, it does seem to be bending. That's not bad. Huh. Honestly, that's a lot better than I thought it would work. So I'm just going to trim it off and then I should be able to squeeze it in place while welding it in the vise. Seems as good a spot as any. Actually, maybe let's make 2 cuts just in case. Hey, not bad. Maybe just another 1/4 inch off. I like how as you crush it, it kind of automatically circles. Yeah, not bad. Maybe just another 1/8 inch off. I would just like to point out that is indeed my original line that I will now be cutting to. And that did it. Almost a perfect fit. And of course, I need 2. And of course, I made 2. And now just weld it up. that's a little warm. And of course, I made 2. And 2, both nice and smooth. And that's the idea, but it looks like my calibrated eyeball measurements were a little off, so I'm gonna have to grind here a little and ship this thing back. Okay, that now fits and I can center my holes. So, time to take all this over to the blaster for a quick blasting before weld primer. First though, just a little tape to protect the areas that I don't want to re-blast since they've already been treated so they won't rust. Don't want to have to repeat that. And also, maybe this will double for paint masking, because again, I don't want to cover the whole thing in weld-through primer. Just this area. Oh, this is just terrible duct tape. The lights inside my blasting cabinet are broken. Of course, that doesn't matter because the glass has been completely sandblasted and is no longer transparent. I really need to fix my blast cabinet. Okay, well, I will just put on my truckologist gloves and get to blasting light feel. Cool. Little bit of brake cleaner to clean the blasting residue off and degrease it before the weld primer. The price of this zinc-rich weld coating has gone to $42 a can since the last time I used it. Bloody ridiculous. Each part will get 2 coats. And yes, I am very much trying to resist painting nipples on these. Haven't actually touched these for about a week, so the paint should be good and dry. Ready to... Oh god, this tape is stuck. Oh, I hate this duct tape. Anyway, once I eventually get this tape off, it'll be ready to weld. To line this thing up, I just need to center one hole within the other hole. I think if I use a piece of metal to kind of clamp it in place. I practiced this a little bit off camera. Seven millimeters. That actually lined up pretty well. It measures basically 7.5 millimeters at all 4 corners. Give or take a 1/4 of a millimeter, which is perfectly acceptable. Clamp these down. I mean, let's face it, the stock spring was just held in by friction and could move like an 1/8 inch in either direction. Okay, that should be tacked in place. And weld it. Well, I assume this thing's still gonna fit. With the lower link back in place. Yep, looks like the spring is gonna fit. There we go. Now I just have to figure out how to mount the top while still leaving access to these two bolts and the air fitting hole. First step in making an upper flange mount is to get rid of the stock spring perch, and unfortunately there's not a lot of space to work, so I'm stuck using the air grinder and the Dremel. And after way too much above the face grinding, the stock spring perch is gone. I have been staring at this for more time than I care to admit to figure out how I will mount the top, because the issue is I have to have access to all the bolts and fittings, and there has to be enough room for them to actually exist. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make another set of flanges. Picture this single flange as two flanges. One welds to the car, the one below it bolts to it, a small spacer between the two to allow some minimal access to the fittings, and then holes drilled on top of the bottom upper flange to access the bolts, if that makes sense. The circular frame side flange will be 5.5 inches in diameter, and of course I'm going to make two since I'll need one for the other side of the car. That said, I'm not going to bother filming it since it's just two more circles cut out of steel, and we've already done that at least twice, and I feel as though we all kind of know how that works. Did I mention I really should have just had these laser cut? And after a few hours on the bandsaw, flanges. To check clearances, I've jacked the axle up basically about as far as it'll go. It's on the bump stop. I'm checking for clearance to route the air line, and it looks like I have plenty here where there aren't any moving parts, but surprisingly also back here, and that's likely where it's gonna go. Now that I know where the spring has to sit, I can just cinch it down, then take the arm off the car, go back to the bench. Just have to measure the hole in the frame. Right around 93 or 94 millimeters. Just some quick computer CAD work to make a drilling template. Start with a 5.5 inch circle because that's the size of the flange. Let's do a 3-inch line because I am going to space some bolt holes 3 inches apart. And then we'll just do 2 circles, call them 5 millimeters. One there, and a drilling crosshair. One there, one there. Okay, and paste that right here. Okay, those are the holes that will mount the flange on the bag side to the flange on the frame side. And now I have to figure out some way to center the frame side flange on the frame rail. And I figure I'll just use the edges of that circle that I just measured. So that means I need to create a 9.4 millimeter circle, 94 millimeter circle. Center that sucker. And what we'll do is we'll just make 5 millimeter holes. 5 millimeter holes with some drilling crosshairs. These. And last one of these. And I also want to create a 5¼ inch cut line to represent the bag side of the flange. 5¼ inch. Whoa. That looks really big, but it's actually... Come on, find the center. There you go. Okay, that should be my drilling flange. Just gotta print it. In case it's not obvious by now, I'm making 2 of everything because, well, there's 2 back wheels. Each hole will get drilled out to 1/8 inch first, then opened up to 5/16. 6 holes later, and I'm all done. And of course, that's what she said. When I made the flange template, I also included this smaller inner diameter, which will be used to drill the 2 bolt mounting holes for the bag side flange. Just have to line that up. The bolt holes on the bag side of the flange are being drilled out a bit larger to 11/32. Whatever that means. Just make sure I get these in the right holes. Sometimes the stainless wants to stick, so a little bit of PB Blaster just to make sure it doesn't gall when it comes out. It's because of the heat cycle. So this flange will weld to the frame rail of the car, this flange will bolt to it. To make this thing actually possible to assemble, there has to be some space between these two flanges. And I think just about an inch, which happens to be these sockets, will do the job, because I can still, although somewhat awkwardly, access all of the hardware. I decided to round that inch up to 30 millimeters. Close enough to the middle. Of course, the radius is all wrong. I'm going to re-arc this thing by stretching it out a bit, and I think the first step on that is to give it a little bit of a squeeze in the press to get it going. Then clamp it in the vise and bend like hell. Yeah, almost. And this is the plan. Just have to make sure this piece leaves enough clearance for the fitting, but that should leave plenty of room to get a wrench in there to tighten these bolts, and lots of room for the fittings. I've made a mark, just put the top spring flange directly on the control arm so I can visualize this, and I am just lining these up by hand. This one I want to be even, so if you look in from the wheel well, it is aesthetically pleasing. This one just needs enough clearance around the fitting to allow access. Just stripping off all the paint and rust from the stock spring perch area so I can get some weld primer on there. A little bit of quick masking to control the overspray. And into the blast cabinet. Perfect, ready to paint. Even when they look clean, they're not. And a coat of zinc-rich weld-through primer for the flanges. And the same for the frame. Show or mask. Now before I fully weld this, I want to get some clamps on here and squeeze this against a piece of, I don't know, what is that, 1/2 inch steel, so it doesn't warp too much. Just want to prevent this lip from peeling that way. flat to me. To place the top flange, I'm going to use the old calibrated eyeball. So I've lined this bottom flange up where I want it, drew a line on the top, and I'm just going to position that so it's basically 90 degrees from the arm. Eyeball calibration isn't bad. Now the car side flange, which has nice and dry weld-proof primer. I can use the alignment holes I made to center it. And now you can also see why I drilled these 4 holes, so I can line them up on the edges of the existing spring perch hole as a rough positioning. And I'll see if I can just get this clamped temporarily in place so it's not falling on my face. And now I just have to make sure it's even on this plane with the frame rail. And actually, that's damn near perfect without even trying. Well, that was fun because under the car, over the head, debris falling in the eyes, welding is always enjoyable. Now there's about a 2-inch area near the shock that I haven't welded. I can't access it. I'll deal with it when I have the shock out. Well, with the flange welded onto the car, we can try to put this whole mess together. And I know this part is going to be kind of a pain. Actually, that's not nearly as much of a pain in the butt as I thought it would be. Guarantee it's going to be kind of a more of a pain in the butt on the car, though. Okay, that should hold the bolts in place. Okay, now the trick is just going to be lining this up. Sorry, there is basically no way for me to film this because I can't see it. So, I mean, the camera ain't going to see it either. There we go, and that's the second one in the hole. What she said. Yeah, this sucks, but it is doable, and I've already figured out how better to assemble this. I'm going to drill another large hole in the bottom flange, the one that meets up with the airbag, and then that way these bolts can be accessed before this assembly goes onto the car. The top flange gets bolted to the car, then the airbag gets attached. Much easier. Actually, a ratcheting thing should make this really easy. Shame I don't have one. And snug. And done. That is an air spring on the rear axle of a 76 Cosmo. First one ever. And with that, I think we'll end it here because, in case you haven't guessed, I have to do the exact same thing to the other side of the car. Exact same steps. And that will happen off camera, and that will give everybody plenty of time to enjoy this video. Now tune in next time, because then I'm going to do the front.